My name is Dakota, and I'm 34. Last Friday, I walked into Jaleo in Philadelphia for our annual family dinner, carrying a custom watch that cost me 2 months of overtime. I figured this time, they'd finally notice. 2 hours later, both my parents looked straight at me and said, "You've done nothing to make us proud." The table froze. I smiled, pulled out my phone, and replied, "Then stop pretending to know me when people ask about your successful child." Before I reveal exactly what I showed them that shut the entire restaurant down, tell me, where are you watching from? Drop your city in the comments. Smash that like button if you've ever had your achievements dismissed by family. And subscribe, because what happened next will shock you as much as it did everyone at that table. Growing up in our house always felt like competing in a game with rules that changed depending on who was playing. My parents, Mike Mitchell and Doris Mitchell, had a clear favorite in my younger sister Blair Mitchell, 32. From early on, Blair's smallest quirks earned praise while my efforts got brushed off as expected. I remember applying to architecture school at 19, excited about designing spaces that could change how people lived. I worked double shifts as a waitress and freelance graphic designer to cover tuition at the University of Pennsylvania. Mom and Dad never offered to help with my bills, but they did cover Blair's community college fees when she enrolled at 18. She dropped out halfway through her first year, claiming the classes didn't align with her creative spirit. Instead of pushing her to finish or get a job, they let her move back home and turned her room into a hobby space filled with half-finished paintings and guitar strings. Blair spent her days sleeping late and hanging out with friends while I pulled all-nighters, balancing sketches and serving tables. When I brought home my first scholarship award, Dad glanced at the letter and said it was nice but predictable for someone studious like me. Meanwhile, Blair deciding to try yoga for a week became a family celebration, with Mom calling relatives to share how her daughter was exploring wellness. The real strain hit during my senior year when Blair's unpaid tuition balance showed up on a statement forwarded to the house. $8,000 in arrears plus late fees. I overheard Mom on the phone with the bursar's office sounding stressed about how it might affect Blair's future opportunities. Without telling anyone, I took on extra weekend gigs at a coffee shop and quietly paid it off over 6 months, dipping into the savings I'd earmarked for study abroad. Blair never knew, and my parents assumed the college had waived the debt out of generosity. By graduation, I'd maintained a 3.9 GPA and landed an internship at a firm in Center City. The ceremony was a quick affair. Mom spent most of it texting Blair about picking up takeout afterward. Dad clapped politely when my name was called, but immediately shifted to asking if Blair needed new art supplies, since she was thinking about starting an Etsy shop. I smiled through it, telling myself the degree was for me, not their approval. After college, I climbed steadily at the firm handling residential projects that required 60-hour weeks and client meetings across the state. Blair floated through part-time retail jobs, quitting whenever a manager asked her to work weekends. Each time, Mom defended her as too talented for menial work and waiting for the right fit. Dad nodded along, suggesting Blair's selectivity showed maturity. The financial help started small. Mom mentioned struggling with the mortgage after Dad's early retirement from engineering, so I sent $300 the first month to ease things. It grew from there, covering Blair's phone bill when she overspent paying for her online courses she never completed, chipping in for household groceries since Blair contributed nothing. By 28, it was $800 monthly wired directly to their account. I justified it as supporting the family, even as my own rent and student loans ate into every paycheck. Neighbors heard a different version. At block parties, Mom would pull people aside to explain how the whole family brainstormed my career moves, with Blair offering key insights on networking. Dad backed her up, saying Blair's people skills had rubbed off on me during family discussions I barely remembered attending. I overheard it once while dropping off groceries and felt the knot in my stomach tighten, but confronting them seemed pointless. Blair, meanwhile, remained at home, her latest interest shifting to podcasting without ever recording an episode. Camden started coming around more, crashing on the couch after dates. He seemed nice enough working steady shifts at a bar downtown, but he bought into the narrative that Blair was on the cusp of something big. I kept sending the money, organizing holiday meals I mostly paid for, and calling every Sunday like clockwork. Each time, I hoped the next gesture would shift how they saw me. It never did. By 18, I had saved enough to strike out on my own. I launched Mitchell Interiors in a small office space near Rittenhouse Square, focusing on sustainable renovations for young professionals moving into the city. The first year meant cold calling contractors, negotiating with suppliers at dawn markets, and redesigning lofts until my eyes burned. Clients started referring friends after I turned a cramped studio into a multifunctional home office that doubled as guest space. Revenue climbed steadily, letting me hire 2 assistants and expand to commercial projects like boutique hotel lobbies. The condo came next. I found a 2-bedroom unit in a converted warehouse along the Delaware River with exposed brick and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the water. Closing required every penny from bonuses, plus weekend consulting gigs for private clients. I handled the down payment alone, signing papers while juggling site visits across town. The place became my sanctuary. I furnished it with pieces from my own line, testing layouts before pitching them to buyers. Mom and Dad spun a different tale at neighborhood gatherings. They told the couple next door that family meetings guided my business plan, claiming Blair suggested the eco-friendly angle during casual chats. Dad added that pooled resources covered the condo deposit, making it sound like a joint investment. I learned about it when a former classmate mentioned hearing congratulations on the family-funded purchase. The words landed like a quiet slap, but I stayed silent, focusing on invoices instead of arguments. The monthly transfers increased to $1,000. I set up automatic payments to their joint account, labeling them as contributions for utilities and maintenance, since Blair remained unemployed and living rent-free. She filled her time scrolling design blogs, occasionally pinning ideas she never executed. Camden Hayes, 30, her fiancé, who bartended at a spot in Old City, began staying over most nights. He contributed toward groceries sometimes, but the bulk fell on my wire. Work demands grew alongside the firm. I secured a contract redesigning a co-working hub in University City, coordinating with architects, and sourcing reclaimed wood from local mills. Evenings blurred into reviewing blueprints under desk lamps, fueled by takeout from food trucks parked below. Success brought invitations to industry panels where I spoke about blending functionality with Philadelphia's historic charm. Awards followed. A local magazine feature, then a spot on a podcast discussing women-led firms. I sent links to the family group chat, receiving thumbs-up emojis from Blair and nothing else. The condo mortgage ate half my income, yet I refinanced to lower rates and kept the transfers steady. Mom called once to ask about upgrading their kitchen appliances, hinting Blair needed better tools for her budding interest in baking videos. I approved the charge on my card without hesitation, shipping the set myself. Dad later thanked me during a brief call, then pivoted to praising Blair's new ring light setup. Camden moved in his gaming console and clothes, turning the basement into his domain. Clients expanded to out-of-state referrals, requiring overnight trips to New York and D.C. I returned to find thank you notes from vendors and silence from home. The firm hit 7 figures in build projects, allowing me to lease a larger studio with a showroom. I hosted open houses, pouring Prosecco while explaining material choices to potential partners. Press coverage mentioned my solo bootstrap story, but back in the suburbs, the narrative stayed about collective effort. Blair announced plans for a lifestyle channel, buying camera equipment on the credit line I co-signed. Camden supported the idea, quitting his second job to manage lighting. I covered the first equipment payment, rationalizing it as investing in her growth. The condo appreciated quickly, letting me pull equity for office renovations. I installed smart systems and custom shelving, turning the second bedroom into a home office mirroring my downtown setup. Transfers became routine, deducted before I saw my balance. Mom texted updates on house repairs, new roof shingles, furnace tune-up, all funded without discussion. Blair's channel launched with one video that garnered modest views celebrated at home with store-bought cake. I watched from my couch after a 14-hour day, liking the post out of habit. Camden commented heart emojis, solidifying his place in daily routines. The firm earned a sustainability certification, opening doors to government contracts. I bid on restoring historic row homes in Society Hill, winning 3 in a row. Crews worked under my direction, preserving original details while modernizing interiors. Profits allowed bonuses for staff and a small reserve, yet the $1,000 left each month like clockwork. Neighbors waved when I visited, repeating versions of the investment myth. I nodded politely, loading groceries into my trunk. Last Friday evening, I pulled up to Chaleo with the gift box on the passenger seat. The valet handed me a ticket as I stepped inside, where the scent of grilled octopus and fresh herbs filled the space. Everyone else had already claimed spots at the large corner table: Aunt Opal Jenkins, Uncle Ray Jenkins, Cousin Bailey Jenkins, and Blair's friend Devin Carter, passing around menus and debating tapas options. Dad spotted me first and waved, pulling out the chair beside him. Mom adjusted her napkin while Blair leaned over to show Camden something on her phone. I set the box in front of Dad and took my seat, greeting Aunt Opal with a quick hug across the table. Uncle Ray asked about the drive from the city, and Cousin Bailey mentioned her kids were with a sitter for the night. Devin introduced himself properly, shaking my hand and saying he'd heard a lot about my work. The server arrived to take drink orders, recommending the house sangria. Dad went with a beer, Mom chose white wine, and Blair requested something fruity. Camden stuck to water since he was driving later. Conversation flowed easily at first, with Aunt Opal sharing stories from her recent cruise, and Uncle Ray complaining about traffic on I-95. Cousin Bailey pulled out photos of her toddler's birthday party, passing the phone around for everyone to see. I waited until the first plates hit the table before nudging the box toward Dad again. He unwrapped it slowly, lifting the lid to reveal the custom watch with its leather band and subtle engraving. Mom peered over his shoulder, tracing the face with her finger and declaring it elegant. Dad turned it in the light, reading the inscription aloud and thanking me for the thoughtful detail. Blair watched quietly, then reached into her bag and pulled out a small tissue-wrapped item for Mom. Mom unfolded the $15 silk scarf, holding it up to admire the pattern of soft paisleys. She draped it around her neck, immediately telling Blair how perfectly it matched her favorite blouse. Dad nodded approval, saying gifts from the heart meant more than anything expensive. Aunt Opal agreed, adding that Blair always picked things with meaning. Uncle Ray joked that he'd take a scarf too if it came in his size. Camden raised his glass to Blair's eye for color, and Devin complimented the fabric quality for the price. Cousin Bailey asked where Blair found it, noting she needed something similar for work events. Mom kept adjusting the scarf, turning to show the server when he returned with more plates. Dad set the watch beside his plate, occasionally glancing at it while portioning out chorizo. The main courses arrived in waves: seafood, paella, lamb chops, roasted vegetables. Dad served Mom first, then passed the pan clockwise. Blair talked about a sale she'd caught at the mall, explaining how she spotted the scarf on clearance. Mom beamed, repeating that it was exactly what she needed. I ate steadily, listening as the praise circled back to Blair's bargain hunting skills. Aunt Opal asked Dad about retirement plans, and he mentioned tinkering in the garage more. Uncle Ray shared tips on car maintenance, offering to look at anyone's vehicle. Cousin Bailey steered talk to school schedules, worrying about upcoming parent-teacher conferences. Devin brought up a new bar opening downtown, inviting the group to check it out sometime. Camden seconded the idea, saying Blair could film content there. Dad compared the watch band to one he'd worn years ago, appreciating the upgrade. Mom folded the scarf neatly after dinner, tucking it into her purse like a treasure. Blair smiled at the attention, suggesting they frame a photo with both gifts. The server cleared plates, and conversation lingered on small updates: garden progress, neighbor gossip, weekend forecasts. As the paella pan emptied, Dad cleared his throat and launched into a story about my college applications. He claimed Blair sat with us for hours, poring over brochures pointing out architecture programs that matched my drawing skills. Mom jumped in describing how Blair highlighted the University of Pennsylvania as the perfect fit because of its urban design focus. Aunt Opal listened intently, nodding as Dad explained Blair's role in narrowing choices down to 3 schools. Mom took over, recalling family dinners where Blair sketched floor plans on napkins to help me visualize studio spaces. She said Blair's intuition about campus vibes sealed the decision, even though I handled submissions alone. Uncle Ray asked if Blair had visited campuses, and Mom insisted she tagged along on virtual tours offering feedback on dorm layouts. Cousin Bailey smiled, saying it sounded like typical sister teamwork. Dad shifted to my early career, crediting Blair for pushing me toward residential projects over commercial ones. He said she noticed my sketches of homes and suggested starting small to build a portfolio. Mom added that Blair reviewed my first client contract, spotting clauses about material warranties. Devin leaned forward, impressed by Blair's business sense. Camden agreed, calling her insights sharp for someone outside the field. The tales continued, with Mom detailing how Blair advised against renting in the city. She painted a picture of late-night talks where Blair calculated mortgage rates versus lease costs, convincing everyone ownership built equity faster. Dad backed it up, saying Blair researched neighborhoods and flagged the warehouse district before it boomed. Aunt Opal commented on Blair's foresight, while Uncle Ray joked about needing her advice for his own investments. Mom described Blair touring open houses with me, vetoing units without natural light, and praising the Riverview condo for inspiration. She claimed Blair negotiated with the seller's agent over closing costs, saving thousands. Camden praised Blair's negotiation skills, and Devin asked if she considered real estate as a side gig. Blair shrugged modestly, letting the praise land. Dad circled back to my firm launch, asserting Blair brainstormed the name Mitchell Interiors during a backyard barbecue. He said she designed the logo concept on her tablet, choosing fonts that conveyed modern reliability. Mom elaborated on Blair sourcing eco-friendly samples for my initial pitches, connecting me with suppliers through her online networks. Cousin Bailey asked for supplier contacts, noting she wanted sustainable options for her home. The fabrications grew bolder as dessert menus circulated. Mom recounted Blair editing my website copy, tightening descriptions to appeal to upscale clients. Dad mentioned Blair attending my first open house incognito, gauging guest reactions to refine presentations. Aunt Opal expressed surprise at Blair's involvement, and Uncle Ray suggested she co-host future events. Camden shared how Blair still clips articles on design trends for my reference, forwarding links with notes on potential applications. Devin nodded vigorously, saying Blair's depth of knowledge explained my success. I watched the narrative unfold, each edition layering fiction over facts I knew by heart. Mom concluded by saying Blair's guidance shaped every milestone, from tuition strategies to marketing plans. Dad raised his glass to Blair's quiet contributions, prompting everyone to toast her influence. Camden wrapped an arm around her shoulders, proud of her role. Devin echoed the sentiment, calling Blair the unsung strategist. Aunt Opal and Uncle Ray clinked glasses, while Cousin Bailey snapped a photo of the moment. The server brought churros, and conversation lingered on Blair's supposed mentorship. I stayed quiet through it all, feeling the weight of rewritten history settle across the table. Mom caught my eye once, expecting agreement, but I focused on dipping cinnamon sugar instead. The stories painted Blair as architect of my path, erasing late nights and decisions made in solitude. Camden asked Blair for tips on upgrading their apartment, and she promised to sketch ideas soon. Devin requested Blair's input on his office redesign, pulling out his phone to show photos. Dad encouraged the collaboration, saying Blair's eye was unmatched. Mom beamed at the attention, adjusting her scarf as if it symbolized validation. The evening stretched with more anecdotes, each one crediting Blair for choices I fought to make alone. With the churros gone, Mom pushed back her chair and stood. She tapped her glass lightly, drawing attention from nearby tables where couples paused mid-bite. Dad followed suit, rising beside her with a practiced smile. Aunt Opal set down her coffee, sensing the shift. Uncle Ray leaned forward, elbows on the linen. Cousin Bailey hushed her phone while Devin and Camden exchanged curious glances. Blair adjusted her posture, waiting expectantly. Mom began by thanking everyone for joining the annual tradition, her voice carrying across the room. She spoke of family bonds strengthened over shared meals and memories. Dad nodded, adding how gatherings like this reminded them of core values. The server hovered at a distance, tray balanced as diners from adjacent booths turned slightly. Mom's tone warmed when she praised Blair's devotion to keeping connections alive through calls and visits. Dad took the floor, gesturing toward Blair with pride. He highlighted her commitment to home life, saying it embodied true loyalty. Mom agreed, contrasting it with modern pursuits that pulled people away. She scanned the table, pausing on me before continuing. The air thickened as her words sharpened. Aunt Opal shifted uncomfortably while Uncle Ray cleared his throat quietly. Mom declared that real pride came from understanding family priorities over individual gains. Dad reinforced the point, stating Blair modeled sacrifice by staying close and supportive. Camden squeezed Blair's hand, nodding affirmation. Devin murmured agreement, eyes on Mom. Cousin Bailey glanced my way, then back to the speakers. The neighboring table fell silent, forks suspended. Mom's gaze locked on me as she delivered the line. Dakota hasn't done anything to make us proud. The words landed heavy, echoing off the tiled walls. Dad piled on immediately. Blair is the one who truly understands family value. He raised his glass higher, inviting applause for her. Blair accepted it with a humble tilt of her head. Camden beamed, toasting her virtues. The table froze in stunned quiet. Aunt Opal's mouth opened slightly, then closed. Uncle Ray stared at his plate, tracing patterns in leftover sugar. Cousin Bailey fidgeted with her napkin, avoiding eye contact. Devin looked between Mom and me, uncertain. Camden kept his arm around Blair, protective. The couple next to us whispered, one covering her mouth. Mom continued, explaining that achievements meant little without humility and presence. Dad elaborated on Blair's daily efforts, cooking meals, running errands, planning holidays. He said those actions built legacy, unlike distant successes. The server retreated, sensing tension. Another table's conversation halted entirely, heads turning. Blair thanked them softly, saying she only did what felt right. Mom pulled her into a side hug, tears glistening. Dad wiped his eye, calling Blair the heart of their home. Aunt Opal forced a smile, murmuring congratulations. Uncle Ray managed a weak thumbs up. Cousin Bailey busied herself stacking plates. Devin offered a supportive nod to Blair. The declaration hung unresolved. Mom sat down, smoothing her skirt. Dad followed, signaling the end with a final sip of beer. Camden whispered encouragement to Blair. The neighboring diners resumed eating slowly, casting sidelong glances. Aunt Opal attempted small talk about weather, but responses stayed muted. Uncle Ray checked his watch repeatedly. Cousin Bailey mentioned bedtime for her kids but stayed seated. Devin scrolled his phone absently. Blair basked in the glow, accepting compliments from Camden. Mom adjusted her scarf, satisfied. Dad leaned back, arms crossed. The atmosphere remained charged, words unspoken, filling the space between us. I stood up slowly, pulling my phone from my pocket. The screen lit with bank statements and email threads I had prepared weeks ago. Dad frowned, asking what I was doing. Mom crossed her arms, waiting. Aunt Opal watched nervously while Uncle Ray busied himself with the check folder. Cousin Bailey kept her eyes down and Devin shifted in his seat. Camden tightened his grip on Blair's shoulder. I started with the transfers, swiping to show $1,000 wired monthly for 6 years straight. The dates aligned with mortgage shortfalls, appliance upgrades, and Blair's equipment purchases. Mom interrupted, claiming it was mutual support. I ignored her, opening an email chain where neighbors congratulated them on my condo purchase, with Dad replying that family funds made it possible. Another message showed Mom forwarding my award announcements as joint achievements. Dad tried to laugh it off, saying exaggeration built excitement. I read aloud a text from Mom to a relative boasting Blair designed my firm logo. Camden's expression faltered, glancing at Blair. Devin scrolled his own phone, perhaps verifying details. Aunt Opal whispered for calm, but I continued displaying payment records for Blair's online courses and phone plans. Blair protested that contributions were voluntary. I revealed the total $72,000 over time plus the $8,000 for her dropped college semester. Uncle Ray exhaled sharply. Cousin Bailey finally looked up wide-eyed. Mom demanded I sit down, voice rising. The neighboring table leaned closer, phones discreetly angled. I addressed the pride comment directly. If my efforts meant nothing, then their reliance on my income ended tonight. I transferred the full dinner bill to Dad's account via app confirmation pinging instantly. Mom gasped, checking her purse for cards. Dad stared at the screen, silent. Camden released Blair's hand. Devin stood halfway unsure. I announced the monthly wire stopped effective immediately. No more covering shortfalls or hobbies. Blair accused me of abandoning family. I reminded her she never held a steady job while living rent-free. Aunt Opal tried mediating, suggesting we discuss privately. Uncle Ray agreed, but I declined, gathering my coat. Cousin Bailey offered a weak goodbye. Mom followed me to the door, pleading for understanding. Dad trailed behind, muttering about ingratitude. I stepped outside without responding, the valet returning my keys. Camden stayed inside with Blair, who began crying softly. Devin paid his share separately. The restaurant buzzed with speculation as I drove away. 6 months passed in deliberate distance. I blocked their numbers after repeated demands for reconciliation on their terms. My firm expanded, securing contracts for 3 historic renovations in Old City. Staff grew to 12 and revenue doubled with new showroom traffic. Clients praised independence, unaware of the personal shift. Mom and Dad's bakery, a side venture funded partly by my transfers, faced difficulties due to unpaid supplier debts. Creditors seized equipment and the lease terminated. They downsized to a smaller home, selling assets to cover shortfalls. Blair lost Camden when rent became her responsibility. He moved out after arguments over finances. She took sporadic gig work, struggling with bills. Aunt Opal sent occasional updates noting Mom's regret, but no apology. Uncle Ray avoided the topic during rare calls. Cousin Bailey focused on her own family, sending neutral holiday cards. Devin unfollowed everyone on social media. I invested the reclaimed $1,000 monthly into firm growth, launching a mentorship program for young designers. The silence brought clarity. Family isn't a place where you must prove worth to receive basic respect. Their consequences stemmed from choices, favoritism, dependency, distortion. I built boundaries that protected progress, not punishment. Thank you for listening to the end. The lesson is simple: value yourself enough to walk away from those who diminish you, even if they share blood. What resonated most with you?